Welcome to Street Fight Politics. I'm Jimmy Zuma. My co-hosts are Harry Ramsbottom. He's a retired soldier and combat veteran, a political pundit, and a political writer. We call him the Soldier. Next is Ed Westerfield. He's a child of Appalachia and a former Republican, things that go hand in hand. He moved west to go to med school, and now he's a successful anesthesiologist, and he uses his wealth to start businesses. My favorite of those businesses is his bar. And I'm a journalist based in Washington, D.C. My name is Jimmy Zuma again. In addition to Street Fight Politics, I'm co-host of the podcast, Wait What? Politics with Zuma and Steele. Normally, I would come to you from Zop Studio in Washington, D.C., but today I'm in a secret location outside of Tucson, Arizona. So let's get right to it. First, we want to talk about polls and polling. Now, on social media, we hear a lot of complaints about polls, and a lot of people saying, I don't believe in polls. A lot of people seem to be suffering from polling PTSD and the various kinds of negative things about polls. But polls are actually very useful and very clear about what's going to happen in this election. It's either going to be a Joe Biden win or it's going to be a Joe Biden landslide. What do you guys think?
You know, whenever anybody tells me that they don't believe in polls, my first response is like, you don't think they learned anything in the past 4 years? But the more in-depth answer to that is the polls in 2016 were actually very, very close. Most of them in those borderline states, the battleground states, were within the margin of error. So looking back, it's not hard to see how Hillary Clinton lost. Looking at the numbers, we know that a lot of Dems just didn't show up because they believed that it was going to be a blowout, and they just didn't get off the couches and go to the polls and do the right thing. We also know that the third-party votes did put a dent in that. It's impossible to know how many third-party votes went to Trump versus HRC, but in those places where really it came down to a few thousand votes, that had an effect. So between those two factors, and those, by the way, again, within the margin of error in those states, that was predictable if we had factored in just people not believing and not showing up.
Well, I think that's true. And I also think that one of the things that happened was there were certainly enough votes for either Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein that were cast either because they were on the ballot or because people thought they could just write them in and that would be sending a message, of course, a message that nobody heard, to have turned the election the other way.
Well, I think there's another factor that you have to throw in there. One, you're getting a lesson in math that the margin of error means that when you're inside of it, that it can either be a few votes or a lot of votes away. But in this case, the margin of error went for Trump. The other thing is that in the battleground states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, there were no polls the last week before the election. They just assumed that those would be Hillary wins. And so there was no quality polling that might have shown you that, the voting is moving for Trump at the last second.
Right. But we do know that from polls that were done and from internal polls from both campaigns that Hillary Clinton crashed after James Comey made his announcement just a few days before the election that he was reopening the investigation into her.
That certainly had an effect.
In effect, James Comey threw the election to Donald Trump, which is ironic in the course of the way things have happened since then.
Karma.
But James Comey is no hero, and he shouldn't be thought of as a hero or a fighter. He's the guy that threw the election to Trump, and that's what he should be remembered for. He violated Justice Department rules. I could go on and on about James Comey, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about polls. We're talking about people's belief in polls. Are you one of those people who thinks that polls are fake or they're not scientific or somehow they don't tell the truth? If you are, I can't be much help to you, but I will just say that you're wrong. Polls do have a value. They do tell the truth. And even in 2016, polls told us a lot about what was going on in the election. Now, let's talk about the current polling. Now, I don't use individual polls. If you see an individual poll, that doesn't tell you anything. It's not a big enough sample. You can't really tell. What I use is poll aggregation. Now, there are two sites that do that, Real Clear Politics and 538.com. And what they do is they take all the polls and they crunch them together and turn them into an average of polls. And both of those have Biden ahead by 10 points or more. It's 10 points at Real Clear Politics, and it's 10.8 points today at 538.com. So, and that's the national polling. Now, it's usually thought that a 6-point lead in the national polling is Electoral College proof. And I mean, obviously, Biden is well above that. But everybody wants to know about the states and the battleground states and, what's happening in the battleground states. Well, usually there are 6, maybe 8 battleground states in an election. Real Clear Politics currently says there are 17 battleground states, and Biden is winning in 15 of them. And let me just talk about the big ones, the big gets. Florida, Biden is ahead by 3.7 points. That's about almost his smallest lead. Pennsylvania, he's ahead by 7 points. If Biden wins Florida and Pennsylvania, he wins the nomination. Michigan, Biden is 7 points ahead. In Wisconsin, he's 6.3 points ahead. So you can see the pattern here. North Carolina, 3.2 points. Arizona, the lead is tightening a little bit. It's down to 2.7 points. But the momentum in Arizona is running for Democrats because of Mark Kelly versus Martha McSally. So what we're seeing here is a situation where the national polls and the battleground state polls are all trending toward Biden, and that lead is getting bigger. So here's what I want you to do when you talk to your friends. Don't try and scare them into voting. Don't tell them you can't trust the polls. Don't tell them, I don't believe the polls. Just tell them this simple thing. If you vote, we win. If Democrats always vote, they always win. Now, I said before the difference between a win and a blowout. So let me tell you, this is getting into the weeds, but let me tell you one little thing about polling. About 90 days out, pollsters change from polling registered voters to polling likely voters. And every likely voter model skews towards Republicans because Republicans are more likely to vote. And it's just that simple. So the current polls that we have are a little bit skewed towards Republicans, but this is an election where it doesn't seem like more Republicans are going to vote than Democrats. That there's a fever to turn out and vote for Democratic candidates this time. So if in fact these polls are correct and the skewing of the polls towards Republicans is incorrect, this election is going to be a blowout.
Well, in fact, I think the skewing is actually undercounting the Democrats this time around. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Georgia, I mean, people are literally crawling over burnt, broken glass, to stand in line for up to 10, 12 hours to vote. And this is like, we're still not quite 3 weeks out from the election. So if anything, I think that you're undercounting the enthusiasm on the left side of the aisle this time around.
Well, and I think there's another factor in that too, and that is that Rasmussen polls, which have traditionally focused on likely voters, even their polls are now showing that Biden is ahead at the outside of the margin of error in most cases now. So even if you look at a traditionally Republican biased, Republican measured poll, Trump's losing. And that's just a fact. The other thing I'd like to point out is we talk about the traditional battleground states, those Rust Belt states that have been battleground for years, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, et cetera. But now we're talking about Arizona, Texas, Georgia. Those have not been battleground states ever. And Georgia is, again, according to 538, is on the bubble. It's a toss-up. The next one past that, I believe, is it Texas? I can't remember at the moment.
Yeah,
but
well, Texas supposedly close. That's in the toss-up category now.
Yeah. So
but we're not going to win Texas.
No, I would be amazed. I would be overjoyed, but I would be amazed. But nonetheless, the fact that it's even in play is fantastic, and that shows how much of a change is coming here.
Those are the states that are changing from demographics. I mean, you look at Arizona, Texas,
Georgia, even.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, states that you never would have expected to be in play. And what you guys are saying is exactly what I was trying to say before. The polling models overcount Republicans because usually they show up more. But in this case, I don't see enthusiasm going Republicans' way.
Well,
I
I'll
think
give you an
many.
interesting story. One of the things that happened on my road to leave the Democratic Party to the Republican Party is I was heavily involved in Republican politics up to the point where after the election in 14, which was a mid-year election, I was invited up by Fife Symington, his son, Jay Heiler, who were very highly placed Republicans, and some other people, that were, in the higher stratus of the Republican Party. And so we went out to get drinks at the Phoenician afterwards. And so we were sitting around chatting, and I had brought up, why, the Republicans continue to ignore the Hispanic vote. And Jay Heiler just looked at me and said, it's very plain why we do. They don't vote, and we don't care, and we're not going to care about their concerns as long as they don't vote. And when they do, then we'll check into it. And I mean, that really was just like, a gut punch for me. I mean, but the thing is, though, from his real politic, he was correct. I mean, it's like, we're not going to waste money on chasing voters and votes who don't vote. And I think this is the election. I think that enough people that in the Latin community, and especially in Georgia in the Black community, that, they're finally recognizing that they've got numbers and they're going to heft their weight in this election.
Right.
Well, to your point, Ed, I think the real indicator there is just how many Democrats showed up for the primaries in all the states. It was very heavy turnout. There's clearly excitement. And with all of the propaganda around Biden and Harris and et cetera, the fact is this was an anti-Trump turnout, not a pro my favorite candidate of the Democratic PAC turnout.
Yeah, that's right. Let's pivot to the Electoral College, because I know everybody's interested in that. And it looks like if the election were held today, it takes 270 Electoral College votes to win the election. 270 electors have to vote in your favor for you to become the president. And right now, Biden has a lock on 226, whereas Trump only has a lock on 125, probably the smallest Republican lock-in in the history, probably in my lifetime. And that leaves 187 votes for as a toss-up. But if you just look on who's ahead in each of the states and you do a no toss-ups map, then Biden is actually at 358 electoral votes today. So if the election were held today, Biden would have about 80 votes more than he needs to win almost 90 votes more than he needs to win the election, Electoral College votes.
Well, Jim, to begin with, I thought when you said 187 attached to your age. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And when you start playing with the numbers of the states that are in the toss-up category, and you take away onesies and twosies, because he's not going to win them all, right?
Right.
He still wins. He would have to basically lose, I think, 3/4 of them for it to even be close. And it's not close. It just isn't.
Right.
So I'm very optimistic. I have been optimistic all along. I have shit my pants several times, but but I'm still optimistic, and I'm even more optimistic because that lead grows every day. It seems I check 538 probably at least 4 times a day. When I wake up, sometimes a couple of times in the middle of the day, and before I go to bed. And every time I do, it seems like it's up another decimal point in Biden's favor.
That's what I've noticed in the last few days. It's been going up 1 to 2 tenths of a point. And those are, if you look at the graphs, those are votes he's taking away directly from Trump. We were at the point where we had 7% undecided. And now we don't have, we basically have a similar number of undecideds. But Trump is declining and Biden is increasing at about the same rate. So he's taking those votes directly from Donald Trump at this point.
Well, I know this is going to be a shock to both of you, and it certainly was to me, is there's still a lot of people that don't really pay attention to politics until like about 10 days
Not on this show,
before
damn
a
it.
national election. I mean, it's like I was at a outpatient surgery center today, and we did talk politics and for most of the day. And it still surprises me that you'll have people that it's like, wow, I didn't realize that, Trump had COVID, and it's like, do you not watch the news? And it's like, no, I don't watch the news. So, it's,
Right. Right.
it takes a presidential election, I think, for a lot of people that, will vote before they finally tune in and start saying, well, who's got my best interests? I'm still hearing, oh, wow, I love the way Trump has helped the economy. And it's like, have you checked the unemployment numbers recently? It's like if you're college educated, you're doing great. But if you're like a lot of my employees at the bar, we're, an establishment that has, fired or laid off half of our workforce, and it's like, we don't know if those guys got jobs or not. But
Well, and
the numbers are saying they haven't.
that's what the airlines are doing now too.
Oh, that's going to be a bloodbath.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And those are highly, for the most part, pretty well paid people.
Well, and the thing to remember about the airlines is too that after a time, I don't know exactly what that time period is, those jobs are just going to disappear. Those unemployment numbers are going to disappear because so many of them are closing in or at retirement age that they're just not going to come back. And that's,
Well,
I admit a lot of that's anecdotal, but I think that's very realistic.
yeah, and it's not only that. People give up on job markets for all kinds of things. A lot of people give up on the job market because they can't find childcare, so one of the parents has to stay home and take care of the kids. People that have enough income to get by just get tired of looking for work, and one of the couple will stay home and not look for work. But all of that,
I think you're onto something, Jimmy, because it's like I'm in my 60s, and so I've got a lot of friends that are at this age, and I'm hearing over and over again that this is fine. I think this is going to be the push that gets a lot of the boomers out of the job market.
I absolutely agree.
Right. But this is about polling. So let's wrap it up. There are a few takeaways from this segment. One is the election looks like it's going for Biden as either a win or a blowout. Democrat enthusiasm is high. Democratic enthusiasm is high, and that may mean that the numbers in the polls are even a little low for Democrats right now. And the last thing, the most important thing that I want to say to you is, if every Democrat votes, we always win. That's how we win. We win by every Democrat voting. So if you're thinking it's in the bag and you're not going to, get up to go vote, you're not going to inconvenience yourself to go vote. That's how we lost last time.
Well, and you have to just look at how the Republicans are responding, and we'll get into that more in the next segment, that they're doing everything they can to throw roadblocks into voting for Democrats. And it's, it's mind-boggling that they're this brazen. I mean, they're not even attempting to hide what they're doing. California Republicans, Texas governors. There's an act of sabotage in Virginia today that we'll talk about. The Republicans know this, and they know that if the Democrats that are even marginally engaged vote, they'll never win another national election again, which is why I think that the Republicans have to look at tearing their party down and starting over.
When you look at and see what they did in 2016, what they learned from 2016, because that was truly the first internet/social media campaign, they're really amping up on that. And what we're seeing now, and this is largely anecdotal, there has been no investigative reporting that I have seen on this, and I have looked, but we are seeing a lot of liberal voices on Facebook and other social media being silenced, deliberately silenced, I believe, by tactics that the Republican fringe are using to get us banned, by engaging us in fistfights online and baiting us to respond poorly, badly, and in such a way that we violate the community rules of that particular medium. So you end up with friends spending a week or so in Facebook lockup because they responded by calling somebody a name when they were baited to do so, and just being intemperate. And I'm going to go ahead and volunteer my story to give you an idea of how this works. And I'm not proud of it. It was a little bit funny at the time, but If you've been following my Harry Ramsbottom page, you noted maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I put up a post about the movie Cuties. Now, to refresh your memory, Cuties is a French film that's being shown on Netflix, and it's about a bunch of street kids doing a street dance routine, and they're teaching themselves. And the whole point of this was about a young immigrant girl from a Muslim family who gets pulled away into this street routine and gets a little bit risque, markedly risque, with some uncomfortable moments in the movie. And I put a review up there about how this was really overblown as far as the GOP or the conservative response, because I'm a dance dad. I've raised 3 daughters. They were all in dance. They did their thing. There were lots of things I saw at any number of competitions across the country that made me uncomfortable as a dad. But they didn't cross the line. They came close. They flirted with the line, but they weren't necessarily and weren't absolutely child pornography. And I put that in a review, and I did this on purpose. I knew I was going to get the QAnon crowd and their fringe would be drawn to this like flies, and they were. This is by far my most responded to comment I've ever done. Over tens of thousands of comments and engagements on this across social media. And in one of them, one of those fringe baited me, and many of them did, but this one particular one tried to pose myself as a child molester, as a pedophile. And I got cute and tried to turn it around and say, hey, if you came here because you were looking for a pedophile page, I'm sorry, we don't do that here. That's gross. But if you're looking for pedophiles, I'll be happy to introduce you if any others come up to this page. That was it. Within an hour, I was off social media for a week because I had called him a pedophile. And yes, I was wrong. That was silly of me. I thought I was being cute. I was not. But they're doing that. And I've seen other attempts on me since then, many of them, and I just don't respond. I've taken the policy of just not engaging. And for all of you out there, all of you social media warriors, if you are in the habit of trying to engage these people and convince them otherwise, one, you're not going to win. You're not. They're not going to be convinced by anything you say. They don't want to be convinced. They just want to get in a fight and get muddy. And two, it's going to get you banned. At some point, you're going to cross the line. They're getting good at it. They're figuring it out. They know what our hot buttons are. And so just don't. Just say, okay, well, screw you, blocked or banned or whatever the device is on your particular medium, and don't do it. But be aware that's happening.
Well, and this became a topic because we all discovered that we all knew about a dozen people who this happened to. And, when Harry related his story, Ed had a story, and I knew a bunch of people. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I knew a bunch of people that it has happened to. And it really does seem deliberate. And it's fine after the election for you to go back to being who you were and, call them assholes and jerks and whatever you want. But up until the election, just don't let them bait you. Don't let that.
Well, I think not only through the election, but I think the important period is going to come after the election. I agree with Mike. I think this has the makings of a wipeout. But just on the off chance that it's even remotely close, and Trump comes out, and they have literally teams of lawyers in all 50 states ready to file lawsuits as soon as the polls close on November 3rd. So, it's going to be important that you have access to social media so that your voice doesn't get stilled. And I think that, I think this is part of the concerted effort to, be throwing bait out in the water that you can take in so that they can come in and, tag you that, you're being, part of hate speech or something like that. And next thing you know, you're banned almost through the entire period that is going to be very important to be able to speak.
Yeah. And here's another suggestion. If you're one of those people who likes to see your counts go up of friends or people who follow you or anything like that, what you're looking at is a count of people who are your friends, people who are good people who are bots, people who are trolls, and people who are sex workers. So it's really not a number of people, the kind of friends you want to have. Don't let everybody friend you. Don't let people friend you who don't have posts. Don't let people who friend you who have a salacious picture, look into their feeds and see what they're saying. If they're not saying anything, don't friend them. If they're, all of their friends are men and it's a woman with, an attractive woman, you might want to check and see what's being said there before you friend her, because that's the sex worker
You
aspect
mean that
of this is-
24-year-old from Sarajevo doesn't like me for
Yeah,
my political views?
Right, exactly.
So, I do have a funny observation about that, and that is that for 5 or 6 years now, I have gotten, like many people, these bot requests, and for the longest time, it was sexy women, it was sexy young women. Then it went to sexy older women, and then it went to burly hairy men.
Is there
And
something
finally
you need to tell
they
us here,
hit.
Mike?
And now it's kind of all over the map. It's like, they keep fishing for some kind of response, and it is funny. And I make a policy of doing exactly what Jim said, and check to see what this profile looks like. And if they don't know anybody, if they they started the profile 2 days ago, and the names don't match up. I mean, sometimes the names are just comical. Of course, I just put them away. But more to the point now, I've started going through my friends list with a machete. And if I don't know them, I either just ditch them outright or send them a nice prepared response that says, hey, I don't know you. So unless I get to know you in the next couple of days, I'm going to have to, say that you should go and check out my Harry Ramsbottom page, because you just don't fit the bill here.
See, that's the thing about Harry. He will never give up on you. He's always trying to save you. He's always trying to keep you in his orbit. He's relentless.
Because I live on clicks. I live on likes.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like so many of us.
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, I made a conscious decision about 2 years ago to basically become a Trump mirror, where I was going to be purposely combative and go out there, but do it from the standpoint that I was coming at it as a progressive liberal, and just reflect back the stuff. And also, I left my page open so it wasn't just for left-wing people, but bringing in sort of like as an outreach to people that were on the right side, and hopefully have some dialogue. It was fun for a while, but I think I reached the critical mass that I think my name was starting to get passed around in the right-wing circles, because all of a sudden I've been getting lots and lots of requests from people that are very obviously, ardent Trump supporters. And I think that's what caught me is that all of a sudden, I'm starting to get what, used to be discussions, then, just turned into just fist fights. And, that's where I got caught up 3 days ago. And
Yeah.
so I agree with Mike. It's like, now it's like, okay, the, outreach program's over. We're just like, we're cutting out anybody that's going to be able to do that. So
Yeah, and here at Street Fight Politics, we're all into fist fights. We're all into political fist fights. We're all into fighting the good fight, but Facebook is not. Facebook uses an automated system to decide who to ban, and that system is flawed. It doesn't work right. It doesn't work the way it should. The other thing is that friending obnoxious people is not an act of bravery. I think it's kind of stupid myself, but I use the sitting in a bar rule, and this is what I'll be doing the next time I'm in Ed's bar. If somebody sits down with you and they're so obnoxious that you would move, then that means you shouldn't friend them on Facebook either.
That's why I never met Ed in his bar.
I would be bartending for both of you. So just FYI, we'd be on different sides of the bar. So you'd be drinking and I'd be serving. So
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I can live with that too.
I figured you would be. So
well, have we beat this one to death?
I think so.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, Ed, it's your turn.
Well, I mean, one of the, as I had alluded to, is that one of the things that's concerned me is that as we go through, I'm looking at, if I'm game playing, what am I going to do to try to get people not to vote? And so one of the things that have started to come out is you're seeing these concerted efforts by people on the far right, like the Proud Boys, and just about anybody that owns an AR-15, and they're going out, standing in the walkways leading to polling places to intimidate voters. And for a lot of people that are seeing these members of Meal Team 6 with their slung AR-15s, yeah, it does make uh, a wall that you're not willing to walk around, and it's like they're sitting there uh, you know literally in your face. And in fact, it's like one of the ones that Jimmy's partner, Representative Steele, she had walked out of a Senate meeting, was walking to her car, where she was accosted by somebody that I happened to have worked with in an OR and was a Facebook friend. And I didn't recognize him because the way he was dressed. But I go out and put out on my social media, hey, we need to identify the guy. And the guy calls me up like 5 minutes later, hey, what the hell are you doing? That's me. And it's like, I'm telling you, that's a pretty dick move, guy. Doing something like
So it only took you that long to identify him, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was amazing how fast it got back, because it's like all of a sudden I was getting, oh, this is this guy, because he was stupid enough to wear scrubs from the place he was working. Plus, he had like 4 or 5 name cards, so you could just go in and it's like, oh yeah, that's you. So
Yeah, right.
not the brightest move.
Well, back to the militia guys at the polling places. We're going to see this on Election Day. We're going to see militia guys at the polling places. I suspect that Donald Trump will put Border Patrol people at the polling places. They're going to do everything they can to prevent you from voting. Now, Georgetown Law School at Georgetown University has prepared a set of guidelines for each state about what you should do if the militia guys are hanging out at your polls. And we're going to put that link on our pages. You'll be able to find it. And it will guide you as to how to deal with it. But these guys are certainly intimidating. And the reason they're intimidating is because they, one, have a gun, and two, they're a dumbass, So,
well, I checked out for Arizona. They don't want you doing anything to basically interact with them. They want you to document. They want you to look. Are they acting in an intimidating manner? Film them. See, are they wearing something that looks like the uniform of a policeman or especially a military officer? Because that is patently illegal. It's a felony to do so. Are they saying things that are threatening? Document it, and then they give you a number to call so somebody can come respond to it. Well, there's only so many cops that can do response to this. And so, if you overwhelm the system, which I think is going to be what they're going to try to do, basically every polling place that is likely to have, a left-leaning voters or Democratic voters, they're going to be
people of
showing
color
up in mass.
Right.
Jim, that is a fantastic point. It's real easy for the 3 white guys here to say, if I see a cop at a polling place, I'm not intimidated. If I see a Border Patrol guy at a polling place, I'm really not intimidated. I would be intimidated if I were a different color. I would be intimidated if I were especially a woman of a different color. It just is that simple. We don't view things through the same prisms. We have a parallax view of what law enforcement represents oftentimes. And if I am, like, for instance, if I'm a voter here in PG County, Prince George's County, Maryland, and I see a cop at the polling place, there's a pretty good chance that cop's going to be a person of color. And I'm a white guy, I don't feel badly. But if I were in Arizona, if I were in Sierra Vista, and I were a person of color, I'm going to see a white cop there for the most part. And I'm likely to feel maybe a little intimidated, especially if it's Border Patrol, because that's a border county.
And, here's one thing you could do. You can hang around after you vote and escort people into the polls.
Very true.
You can bring some friends, hang out outside the polls, and you kind of stand between these militia guys and the polling place. There are lots of things you as an entitled person can do to help out. The other thing is, people of color, you should go in groups. Try and go in groups if you can. Try and bring your friends with you in the car and go directly to the polling place. Don't engage these people. Just walk right in and exercise your right.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing. Don't engage.
Correct.
It's like if you have to walk around them. You're going to have to put your pride aside that you're not going to go up and physically confront them. I mean, it's just going to, it's going to happen someplace. I mean, that's what all 3 of us have been talking about, that there's going to be some hothead on both sides. They're going to get into it, and something bad is going to happen. I mean,
The other thing I'd point out is, this is not the time or the place to go wearing your Democrat Biden gear if you're going to go in and vote. In most states, I think it's true. I'm prepared to be wrong, but in many states, at least, it's illegal. It's banned to be wearing political paraphernalia when you go into the polling place.
Yeah, you can't electioneer once you enter in a
right. And there's usually a distance limit
I know
outside
that
of that.
Arizona has a 200-foot line, a 100-foot line, and a 50-foot line.
Yeah.
On it gets more restrictive on what you can and can't do.
Right. This is not the year to stand on your right to speak by wearing clothing into the polls. Speak outside that distance, but don't wear your Biden sunglass shirt into the voting place.
But if you want to, it's worth noting that the Supreme Court has said that voters can't be stopped from wearing election-related clothing. So
I'm not going to disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is a time when things are going to be very sensitive and people are looking for a fight.
Well,
Right.
This is more in line of people handing you pamphlets or coming up and trying to get you to change your vote.
right, that's electioneering.
That's electioneering. But the thing is that it also points out just how desperate the Republicans are because of how they're reacting already. So you've got all these groups that are out there that are obviously right-wing militia type groups that are there. But you have things like in California where the Republicans are putting up fake boxes like bait traps so that you're going to go put your ballot in, and again in Democrat areas, and by God, those ballots just disappeared.
I think there were 50 of them in California.
And then you go to Texas.
And there still are.
Yeah, they refused to take them down.
Really?
Yeah, that's the latest report I saw just before I came on the show.
That's incredible. But then you have Texas where Abbott, makes it so that you can only have one place per county to go turn your ballots in physically if they're mail-in ballots, which if, you're in Alvarez County where there's literally 5,000 residents, it's not a big deal. But if you're in Harris County with 4.7 million, it's going to be a little harder to stand in line.
Yeah, Harris County is bigger than the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have what happened today in Virginia. Early this morning, the server farm that has the servers for the state of Virginia's election
Registration system.
The fiber optic cables coming into that were deliberately cut.
Is that what they found out that was an act of sabotage?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, great.
They
So
were
this was the
deliberately
last
cut.
day you could register to vote in Virginia. And, election workers, you got to love them. They were registering people on paper by hand when they called. But it's just another way that these desperate Republicans will try to win this election. They will do anything because anything illegal they do, they won't be adjudicated until after the election. They don't care. They just want to win. They just want to win this one because this is their last chance to win one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is the watershed election.
Right. The next group of voters who are young and just getting ready to vote and aren't voting at the levels we would like them to be voting at, that group is bigger than the group of baby boomers. It's the biggest generation yet in history in this country. And they are decidedly liberal and progressive and anti-hate and anti-bigotry. That's all natural to them. So they will never vote for Republicans, and they don't have a good feeling about Republicans. This is Republicans' last chance to win an election and then have 4 more years to try and change things.
Why McConnell is so desperate to get, this Notre Dame professor in and put her in so that they can have a 6-3 majority. They've been packing the courts, basically for the last 6 years because they were slow walking Obama, pretty much through his entire 8 years, to leave like 225, federal and appellate court positions open when Trump came in. And, then the Merrick Garland fiasco.
Right.
So, talk about packing. I mean, the Republicans have been packing the court. And so that's going to be their legacy that they're going to be leave behind.
So let's talk about that. Are you guys ready to move on to that?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Excuse me. it would be easy for us to spend an entire hour just talking about the SCOTUS pick and the process and everything else. But here's a reality, and you guys can tell me I'm full of shit or not. There's
You're
really
full of
nothing we
shit.
can do about it. There is, well, thanks, Jim. I
But
mean, on
carry
this
on.
subject,
But carry on.
there's nothing that we or the Senate Democrats can do about it. They have exhausted every procedural measure in the bylaws of the Senate that they can use, and the votes just aren't there unless you get a couple of defections. I think 3 defections or 4 on the GOP side. She's going to be confirmed. That's just the way it's going to be. Here's the other reality. There is nothing in the Constitution that prevents us from packing that court. I realize it's unpopular. Biden might not be wholly for it, but the reality is it's not a presidential thing. It's a congressional thing. If Congress decides that they want to change the number of the Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13 to 21 or whatever that number is, they can do it. And if the Senate, with a simple majority vote, decides to take away the filibuster, which they can do if the Democrats are elected, then it's a done deal as long as Biden signs it. And I believe he probably would in that case. I'm not thinking for him. I'm not putting words in his mouth. But if that kind of overwhelming majority shows up and says, we want to change the way the court does, there's nothing that anybody can do about that either.
Well, I think you're not only going to have the number of Supreme Court justices change. I think you're also going to see the number of appellate court justices change, as well as just the number of federal judges change. And if you look at what's happened to the justice system over the last 50 years, we haven't really increased the number at any level, but the number of suits coming into the system, it's overwhelmed right now. Which
I think it's an excellent point, Ed.
Well, and the amount of time it takes to adjudicate one is
years.
way out of line. Now, what Republicans have done during the Trump administration is for the appeals court, that's the court just below the Supreme Court, they put in 50 new judges to that court. All of them have been white men, 50 white men, not a woman of color, not a man of color, just 50 white men. And this is the legacy they're trying to leave us with. I have a proposal for reforming the Supreme Court, and I call it SCOTUS 21. And it goes like this, and I'll be interested to see what you guys think of it. We raise the size of the Supreme Court to 21 justices. We have 5 justices randomly assigned to each case. The full court of 21 can decide to hold an en banc hearing if a majority of justices want to do that. And what that means is they can revisit a decision by the 5 that they don't think was right. Now, this does a few things. One is it eliminates the backlog at the Supreme Court. Years and years of backlog at the Supreme Court. It allows the court to take more cases. And because the judges, the 5 judges are randomly assigned, it really reduces the possibility of getting a partisan decision rather than a judicial decision.
Well, that's what the federal courts have been doing for years. I mean, you go up to San Francisco, it's almost always a 3 to 5 judge panel. You almost never get an en banc setting where they all meet at the same time. And so, extending that to the Supreme Court, I think makes perfect sense.
And there's nothing, I don't think that there's anything anti-constitutional in that. And I think it's certainly worthy of a debate and a discussion. I'm not enough of a jurist scholar to be able to say that that is the right way to go, but I think it's certainly something we absolutely as a society have to look at. And if nothing else, the selling point of that to me is, one, that we will increase the throughput on the Supreme Court, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be decided that ain't being decided. 2, that the fact that you have that randomness of the 3 to 5 judge panels, justice panels, reviewing those cases, you will decrease the ability for this thing to be politicized by tenfold easily, because you can make sure that there aren't, every judge panel is going to be different, have a different makeup. With 21 justices, you've got a lot of combinations you can make before you run out.
Well, and the thing is that when you look at most of the decisions, except for the big social cases like abortion and gay rights, most of the cases are 9-0 decisions anyway. I mean, it's like 9-0, 8-1 at the most, and it's they're almost always in total agreement, except for those hot button issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so even if something initially gets decided, in a smaller panel, the chances that you're going to have an abortion decision not decided in bank is zero. You're
Right.
going to come back, and that's going to be that's going to be full panel.
Right. And, we have evolved to a place where the Republican Party does not even pretend to represent voters anymore. They're
Yeah.
trying to keep you from voting. They're trying to keep you from exercising your right. They're trying to keep you from living the life that a vast majority of Americans want to live. 79% want more effective gun control. But the Republican Party is not addressing that concern of voters. They're addressing corporate interests. They're addressing interests that allow them to enrich themselves. They are not working for voters at all. And now that's been extended to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has become a partisan exercise. And that's not justice. That's not judicial. It's frankly, I find it embarrassing, but that's the situation we live in now.
Well, I'll take you one more. I don't think it's just that they're not representing voters. I don't think that they're representing people who aren't already successful. I mean, it's like by all rights, coming from the hollers of Eastern Kentucky, I could have been a coal truck driver, sitting here with half my teeth and, being on welfare by now.
As long as you still had a bar.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Let's stick to what's important here at the bar.
But
anyway, go ahead.
But that was the important of both of my parents getting us educated for us, and so my siblings have been very, very successful in life. But if you go back and look at what's happened to a large segment of the population, they haven't been able to avail themselves of that type of upward mobility. And I think that was what Trump tapped into in 2016, that, for years, neither party really came in and said, okay, we're going to be taking the people with limited or no college education who have been basically bypassed by the economy or shunted aside by the economy over the last 50 years and try to do something for you. And,
right.
It's how can, I can't really look at that and say that it doesn't make sense that, you did lash out like that in the last election and say, okay, what do you have to lose? And it's well, now we know.
In all fairness, Obama had a program to transition coal workers to solar power and offered free classes for that. And the coal miners didn't take him up on it. They didn't take advantage of those classes because they were unemployed and because they wanted to be coal workers. And Hillary Clinton had a massive retraining and restructuring program for the folks in Appalachia to move them to clean energy jobs. And she was defeated by those same people. So, it's really not that nobody has done anything. It's just that nobody's listening.
There's a lot of cultural inertia in that.
Right.
And, as somebody who was part of that milieu that managed to inertia my way out of there, I can't say I understand it. I know, how it works, having been part of it. But, ultimately it's going to come down to, the people that are like that are going to have to make a decision. If somebody throws you a lifeline, you're going to have to grab onto it.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to point out that this is what you've said about these measurements about people being able to progress. These are not ideological statements. These are just statements of fact. These are measurable things. And this has been known for years. That knowledge has just been repressed in so many places. And this is why you see most college-educated whites are for Trump. Most college-educated are not for Trump, are for Biden and Harris, because they've been exposed to that knowledge. And it's the people that have not been exposed to that knowledge that still support him and make up that 43% of the hardcore Trump supporters.
Well, and those are also the people who have been acculturated by the Republican Party to believe that they should pay taxes and not get anything in return for it.
Right.
Which is the oddest, I can't believe that works on anybody, but it works on these same people who are, the newest surveys show that there are a bunch of people who are Trump supporters who are authoritarian leaning, and they feel scared all the time, and they want some big, strong daddy to take care of them. And that's why they're Trump supporters,
Yeah.
because along with him, they are also authoritarians.
Well,
We're not going to fix the whole Republican Party, but
again, it's the trite comparison going back and comparing Trump to Hitler. But I mean, it's like when you start studying it, it's a good thing that Trump isn't smart at all, because Hitler did have some intelligence. And when you look at what Hitler did when he played to that fear of people, losing out, you go back into the 1920s and the Weimar Republic, they wanted a strong figure to come in and save them. And that's what Hitler did. And we knew where that went.
We're seeing the same thing now. We're seeing it.
Trump's trying to do the same thing. It's just that he's a fucking idiot.
Right.
And he surrounded himself with other people who are also genetic idiots that, won the lottery as far as being trust fund kids, but, have no talent whatsoever.
Well, and you're seeing that as the government falls apart. There were multiple articles this weekend, but certainly one about the incompetence of Trump's cabinet. We're seeing the end stages of that, where he's gotten rid of anybody who had any ability. He's gotten rid of the generals, Mattis, et cetera, that would stand up to him and tell him no. And now there's nobody there who will tell him no, and things are failing, and demonstrably failing.
Well, and I think that's affecting the polls as they pivot to Biden. His lack of success, his disregard for the safety of the people around him. A lot of people feel for those Secret Service agents and those White House workers who are exposed to maniac without a mask.
Absolutely.
And I think on that, we're going to bring this second edition of Street Fight Politics to a close. Street Fight Politics, it's a politics show based on the idea that politics is no place to turn the other cheek. We tried that for 40 years and it didn't work. It's no place to back down, and it's no place to give in. So each episode, we'll bring you the topics that we think are most important for fighters. And we want you to just put your dukes up and fight along with us. And thanks for joining us.
I thought that went well. I thought that went